Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Javi Hoffman. I'm from the Developer Relations team, and I'm here in the San Francisco office. And for all you folks out there in Air Mozilla land, it's my great pleasure to kick off our Winter 2017 Mozilla Tech Speakers Masterclass season with Lara Hogan. She's an engineering director from Etsy. She comes to us today from New York, and she's the author of several books, Designing for Web Performance, Building a Device Lab, and today's topic, Demystifying Public Speaking. Lara will talk for about 40 minutes. Please save your questions till the end. We'll have a great Q&A session. And now, without further ado, let me introduce Lara. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, and hello, everybody in Air Mozilla. It's actually super cool to be here, especially working with a company that invests in people who work here to help them get up and speak. Very rarely do I be able to talk to a company that actually is thinking about this stuff and like helping to encourage their folks get up and do this stuff. So I'm super jazzed to be here. I've chosen some specific talk topics for today based on the information that Javi shared with me about the other stuff that other masterclass speakers are covering to make sure we don't do lots of duplicate work. And I've basically picked and chosen some stuff from the book topic, Demystifying Public Speaking, that felt most appropriate to share with you all here today with my speaking voice rather than the reading voice. So definitely feel free to ask me questions, not just about this stuff, but about anything else that may pique your interest while we're here. Again, questions at the end. So this is a picture of me giving my first big talk. It was to a crowd of more than 400 people. I was invited to come and give a talk about web performance. And a few days before the conference started, I took a look at the website and I realized I was scheduled actually to do a keynote. And no one had thought to mention that was the deal. So I revamped the content. I'd made it a little more accessible for a broader audience. And then as I was standing by the side of the stage waiting for them to introduce me, I started to realize they had actually invited the wrong person. So they began to read the biography of someone who definitely wasn't me as they were introducing me to get on stage. And I realized, oh no, I'm like literally an imposter up here. Look at my face. I'm in so much pain. Poor Lara. Right, but that wasn't the end, right? I kept on going. I continued to give talks on web performance and on other topics a bunch. I mean, there's no good reason why I kept on doing it other than I thought to myself, this can't get worse, right? This can only get better from here. So I've had the privilege of giving lots of talks to lots of different groups of folks, different sizes of audiences, and I've gotten a handle on what it feels like to get up and do a physical spotlight and say some prepared words to someone. But I do want to highlight that public speaking isn't just about conference talks, right? So it's about any moment when you have this spotlight on you and you have to say those prepared words to some people, hopefully without bursting into tears or puking on yourself. And we do all of this in our industry already. We're already doing things like talking about our code in person, having team stand-ups, asking your boss for a promotion, maybe pitching a project to your team. Our designer friends out there will be thinking about giving design critiques. We're already doing this stuff. It doesn't have to just be in a conference setting or a meetup setting. So everything that you already do day to day, you can utilize those skills for the physical spotlight when it happens. I do also want to highlight that most of us get nervous when we're in this spotlight. So I'm going to guess that the majority of people viewing this today get a little bit anxious when they think about public speaking. There's a famous survey that found that Americans fear public speaking more than heights or spiders or death, but this is true just for not Americans as well. This public speaking fears, I think, rattle our industry. And I know that all of you are excited to get up and do public speaking. That's why you're watching this talk. But I do want to see if some of these fears might resonate with you. So we're not going to talk about how to write a good presentation or slide deck. What we're going to focus on is what will help prepare you as an individual to get into that spotlight. I'm going to walk through some different tactics that work for different kinds of people based on fears of being judged or fumbling our words or making sure we don't trip and fall as we get on stage, which is my personal #1 fear about public speaking. I'm also not going to ask you to sound like you're giving a TED Talk. I'm not going to talk about public speaking rules because I think that having a homogenous group of speakers isn't the point. I want to help you learn what you bring to the table here, your strengths, your fears, your weaknesses, all the things that you want to share with the world. So again, there's a lot more to be said about public speaking than what I'm going to cover today, so I've chosen a few points that are relevant for the kinds of talks that you might want to give. So We're going to talk about finding the right words to say and how to practice them. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about feedback because it's crucial not just for these spotlight moments. And then we'll cover how to prep for your spotlight moment, and then we'll talk about celebrating it. So what you choose to focus on in your talk is the product of many things: the content that inspires you, the level of depth you're comfortable sharing, and what you learn as you take your topic for a test spin with others. At the end of the day, what we're aiming for is a fruitful topic that you feel really comfortable giving a talk about. So let's talk about how to brainstorm from the work that you're already doing day to day. So in my case, I was doing lots of web performance work. I was speeding up company websites. And I started to tell coworkers about how fast I'd made the mobile version of the site. And then I started practicing talking to my boss and other higher-ups. Again, kind of like informal conversations, workshopping the idea of like how we were doing this work and how it was actually making an impact for our customers. I started to write about it on the company blog, and then through writing and having these conversations, I got more comfortable building up a narrative, building up a thesis statement. What was the point I was trying to make? What were those questions that I was fielding, either than in blog comments or just from my boss? And how could I address those as I kept on iterating on this topic? So what do you spend large amounts of your day thinking about or working on? Large projects are great sources of inspiration because they feature so many facets that you could shine up for a talk. No matter what facet you choose, so tools or human stuff or problem solving, your future audience has probably felt or can identify with a number of those challenges. So maybe you want to give a how-to on how you learned to code for a project, or walk through how you chose one tool over others. Maybe your project received feedback from stakeholders at the time, and you want to share how you want to get buy-in earlier next time. Or maybe you'll talk about initial bottlenecks to your project, like deciding on and coordinating an approach that works for all of the teams that were involved. Each of these possible topics contains a relatable story, an inspiration, a demonstration, or a new approach for someone in your audience. I do want to highlight that your topic doesn't have to be the most inspiring, thought-leadering idea in the universe. So even though I've branched out into speaking on deeper and more technical topics, I know that audiences get the most out of my intro-level talks because most often that content is entirely new to them. I find that they're super engaged during Q&A, and they highly rate my talks that are 101 level after the conference concludes. So please remember, intro-level or 101 level talks, they're a terrific way to gain practice. The information often applies to a broader spectrum of job roles, so people wanted to learn this stuff, and they're versatile and they can be tweaked per audience. And also, conferences are generally eager to have this foundational knowledge to set the stage for future talks to come. All right, so this is the section of the talk that covers people who have fears about fumbling your words or being boring or rambling. So creating a solid structure of your content is the best way to guide your audience through that topic. So structure helps set the expectations for what's next, helps strengthen your arguments, and helps keep folks more engaged. It also gives you a foothold if you are worried about losing your train of thought. So while not a requirement, juiciness is an angle to consider as you vet your topic. So a good hook is going to help your odds make it through that conference proposal process. Sample juicy aspects and scenarios might include timeless or newness. So is this technology or an approach to your work the kind of thing that's like hotly debated online? Are you providing new data on how tool XYZ is a much better tool than ABC in certain conditions? Or were you tasked with making big decisions that were fairly political, like requiring someone to overhaul their design workflows, or building or getting buy-in into a mobile strategy for the first time? Or were the lessons that you learned during your work counterintuitive or contrary to best practices? So as an example, at Etsy, we ended up finding that continuous scrolling converted really poorly for our users. We implemented pagination, which is not something I've ever seen another e-commerce company do. And it was really helpful for us to talk about how we kind of went against the grain of best practices because it was found best for our users. It was a juicy topic. So if you have a solution to something that might be efficient, but also might flabbergast some folks, definitely consider that for juiciness. So when we get nervous, we often try to jump right into what it is that we're trying to communicate. But it's important to set expectations at the top for why am I here in this spotlight? So even before you jump into your narrative structure or your thesis, make sure it's clear to folks in the room. What are you going to cover? Why is this important to you or to them? What do you hope that they will walk away with? By setting expectations up front, your audience, no matter how big or small, will be primed for what it is that you want to say next. You'll open their ears and their brain, and you'll make it even easier for your information to land. So as you develop your content structure, figure out what to include that's actionable or inspiring. What will your audience, again, your boss, your team, or a crowd in front of you, do with the information that you're sharing? Is it clear to you what their next step should be, and will it be clear to them? How much will you have to tee up that information? And can you do that in the time allotted? Will you have to do a tremendous amount of explaining your context before you can get to your point? There's a chance you're going to need more than one talk, more than one meeting, a link to external info to make sure that people can understand what you're trying to communicate and go and do some more research afterwards if they're really confused by it. I also wanted to take a moment and just highlight the stuff that I'm talking about, like setting an agenda at the top and making sure everybody has shared context. This is a tremendously meta experience to be talking about public speaking. So I apologize to other speakers you'll see in the future. You'll probably be analyzing them and me right now with how well we're doing the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So let's talk about structure. This could look like telling a story to get your point across, or like a thesis statement supported by a bunch of arguments. Once you have that main nugget you'd like to communicate, think about what you'll need to back it up and make it land. So I'm going to walk through basically the structure I'm using today, again, that thing that's being really meta, but the structure I generally like to use for my talk topic. So I start with a landscape. So here's what exists. For web performance, it was sites are slow often. The analysis is here's what I see. So in the case of web performance, I can say sites are slow, and I've noticed this is bad for users, or there are studies that are here that back up my point. My problem statement. So at the core is this issue. Here's some options for what we could do about it. I like to list a bunch of options that people won't even want to include. That way I can prove why my point, my option that I'm suggesting is the best. So here's the best option and why it works. Here's why you should believe me. And my favorite part is, why does this concept matter to you, even if it's irrelevant to your particular day-to-day job? So within the context of web performance, I would often say, let's say you have to get buy-in at your company to do something that people don't want to do. I can talk about it in the context of web performance. It's important to get my company to care about site speed, but maybe web performance isn't the thing for you. Maybe it's getting translations, maybe it's mobile development, something else. I make sure I cover something along these lines to make sure that there's this bigger idea at the end. So in this narrative structure, we are kind of here now, and we're also kind of here. You'll see that I'll weave back and forth through this topic. I've built this talk so it resonates with different kinds of people struggling with different kinds of needs or fears, and also different kinds of spotlights. So once I determined that my point was that we all can and should be able to use our fears about public speaking to push us towards that spotlight, I workshopped this narrative around it to support it. In this case, also, I specifically tried to find out what needs Mozilla has and what would be most beneficial to you to talk about. And again, I workshopped this narrative structure around that. So once I had the basic structure nailed down, I iterated on that narrative to make sure it wasn't just a dry list of information, because just saying words at you doesn't mean it's going to land. You could, list your work to your boss and hope that they just understand that's why you deserve a promotion, but you need to do a better job than that. So let's talk through the stuff we can do to level up our content to make sure it's not just informational, but has that chance of landing. So you may think it's smart to tell a joke. Firstly, jokes are terrifying. Don't feel like you have to be funny, just be yourself. But in the drier parts of any talks that I'm giving, I'll see what I can incorporate to spice things up. In this picture, I'm telling a story of when I didn't document an icon font well. This was a whole narrative about, editing fonts to make sure that the site loads fast. And my part about web fonts was really boring. It was very tactical. So what I started to do was tell a story about how we had this bug on Etsy. It was an icon font bug. Instead of the half-star glyph, iOS was choosing what it thought was the next closest icon, which in our case was a horse head. This actually showed up for a bunch of our users, and it caused maybe the most hilarious bug in Etsy history. So I didn't need to tell that story. It wasn't entirely relevant about how to make fonts fast, but definitely was relevant enough that it was able to carry my story through. So I was able to keep folks laughing and engaged. I laughed, and that makes me a better presenter. People are more likely to listen to me when I'm smiling and laughing on stage, right? So telling this story helped make sure that stuff was landing and people would stay awake through the rest of my talk. So I do this throughout my spotlight moments. It can be subtle and secret, like adding a Post-it note to your laptop when you open it with a message from your partner, or a picture of someone or something like Buttercup, the sloth, that makes you smile. So I recommend trying to weave it into your narrative as appropriately as possible. Again, we don't want to distract our audience. So when I talked about that horse head or these pictures of sloths, I make sure that I'm grinning and laughing, but also not distracting my audience. So again, when I do these things, it's important to make sure that we're incorporating humor or imagery or other things that not just aren't distracting, but also aren't triggering to folks. The last thing you want to do is alienate folks by using a meme or some sort of imagery that's going to be triggering or distracting to folks. I want to make sure you're double checking this stuff. So I often run all of my presentation slides and images past a bunch of coworkers and just gut check. Does this make sense? Is this distracting? Might this be triggering? Might I not know the history of this meme? Those are all good questions to be asking yourself. I also want to highlight that you have this soapbox, and you should be using the soapbox for good when you're getting up on stage. Make sure that you are not just using a homogenous group of images. There's tons of resources out there to make sure you're using images of a diverse set of humans doing a diverse set of things, or diverse set of animals doing a diverse set of things, because, again, we have this soapbox, we should be using it for good and inclusively. Speaking about inclusiveness, triple check that your content is easy to see and to scan. Your audience shouldn't be spending more energy parsing tiny or low contrast text rather than listening to your message. So pay attention to typefaces and colors. Too many of either can distract your audience. And use color accessibility tools. You can check color contrast and also sizes of fonts to make sure that everything that you're doing is readable with people who have low visual needs or are blind. So taking steps to improve readability can help everybody in your audience. Test your slides from a distance. Sit in the back of the room that you're practicing in and make sure that on any projector it'll still be able to be read. So next, take it for a test drive. Make sure it resonates with others. So I usually, again, start out by writing. I will write a blog post or a series of blog posts to kind of iterate on my thought process for a future presentation. I won't make it explicit that it's for a future presentation, but I'll open up to comments or to Twitter questions, and I'll see what I get back. I try to start and notice which stuff resonated the most, which quotes were tweeted the most, what were people asking me questions about? Can I make sure that I'm clarifying that again in the future? Doing this process of writing and sharing online is helpful to me, and it may be helpful to you if you do enjoy writing. If you don't, consider giving a mini presentation, like over the water cooler, or talking in a meeting that you have about this topic. Start to talk about it, ask people questions, see if the word choice that you're using is making sense, and iterate it on it that way. So as I started writing the first draft of this slide deck, I shared it with a few organizers of meetups and conferences and also Javi to get their feedback. I wanted to hear which aspects of it would resonate with their audiences. And then after I had a better idea of how my thesis could be framed or what kind of examples I could use to support my point, I iterated on the basic outline until I was ready to start doing some dry runs. So almost all of the fears that I hear from speakers who are both experienced and also people who are inexperienced, I think that most all of these fears can be alleviated with a healthy amount of preparation and practice. So whether you're afraid of saying something wrong or missing the mark on what the audience wants or fumbling on stage, again, most of all of this can be alleviated with some amount of prep. So build in enough time to make sure that you have space and time to work things out with far less stress. No matter what the venue, practice plenty before you're in that spotlight. I also want to highlight that rehearsing is an extremely personal endeavor, and so my best advice is to start by focusing on just one aspect at a time. So when you think about being in that spotlight, which part feels the most unfamiliar? How confident do you know what to do with your hands? Or how confident are you that you can stay on track with your audience in a prepared narrative? So adopt a method that allows you to rehearse and practice just the little bits and pieces that feel the most unfamiliar. So for this talk, I wanted to make sure that the flow of the content made sense. I didn't jump around a bunch. So when I practiced, I paid special attention to making sure I was building the information in a way that flowed. And once you have those different individual pieces feeling good, move on to practicing what you want to say in its entirety. Lots of folks instinctively stop when they mess up during a run-through, right? We'll fumble our wording or something, and we'll stop and we'll have that little voice in our head that just wants us to wallow for a minute. We just want to be like, ugh, why can't I do this? This feels horrible, or whatever it is. We don't have that instinct naturally to push on through and recover from that fumble, but that is the most crucial part to practice, right? You can't get stuck there. Practice making that fumble and getting through it. That way you have the confidence, once you get up in that spotlight, you'll be able to make it through another fumble like that if it happens in real life. All right, so you've done this practice by yourself, you've rehearsed a little bit, hopefully you've gone through the whole thing a bunch of times. We're gonna spend a lot of time practicing in front of others and getting some feedback. So before we get into this larger practice run, I want to take a moment and point out that receiving feedback is the worst. Humans are mostly bad at giving feedback. We're also really bad at preparing ourselves to receive feedback. This is true no matter the situation. Hearing that we do something at home that drives our partner crazy, or our coworker, or our boss. And most of us are paralyzed by the fear of having these awkward conversations. We actively avoid asking for feedback because it's just so painful sometimes. Or we'll go out of our way to give non-specific, just generic feedback, sometimes what we like to call compliment sandwiches, like, you look great today. That talk you gave was really boring. But you're really smart, right? That's a compliment sandwich. We want to avoid doing those things. So in this section, I want to help encourage you to overcome your fear of asking for feedback and help others give you actually specific, actually actionable feedback. So I'm going to keep on using this example of giving a practice run for a conference talk, but I'm hoping that these tactics will help you in all different areas of your life that feedback comes into play. So first, pick that crew of people that you want to rely on to give you good feedback. So I like to limit this at first to like 3 or 4 people, and it's helpful if they're people who you know are already good at giving feedback, not just people who will tell you what you want to hear, because that's not going to help us out at all. So pick people who either are familiar with your future audience, so they know they have some context about what those folks are interested in, or the knowledge that they already have, or the questions that they might be asking you. Or pick coworkers that are really familiar with your topic that you know you want to speak on. They'll be able to help you come up with super strange, aggressive, weird audience questions to help you practice. Or just say people who you know and you trust, you can feel safe around, who can eventually give you some really helpful feedback. So the obvious choice for getting feedback is in person, right? But if practicing in front of people is less than comfortable, but you'd still like feedback on narrative, word choice, or some other non-body language stuff, consider also recording a dry run privately and then getting asynchronous feedback from your crew. So my coworker practices alone, records his talk on his computer, and then sends it to others to get their thoughts via email. This lets him dedicate time and focus to each step of the process, right? Practicing and rehearsing and recording that, and then separately a brain for receiving that feedback. But if you choose to practice your words in person, this is your chance to gather nonverbal feedback and practice reading the room. So this is a photo of 2 audience members during one of my conference talks. I hope you all feel as engaged right now as they look. I really wish I knew what I was saying when they were staring so intently at me on stage. So as you're practicing with others, watch how people respond, right? Do they laugh? Do they lean towards you and look focused? Are they nodding? Do they look confused or distracted? By tracking this kind of feedback, you'll develop a sense about which parts of what you're saying are more engaging, or move too quickly, or should be further workshopped. Before I move on, this slide image is really sneaky. So this is, again, a real picture from a conference talk I gave. It was a keynote to about 2,000 people. I didn't know these 2 very well at the time, but the guy on the right, he no longer has a mustache, but he's now my boyfriend. So when I keep this image in here, I'm like seeing him, I'm like, oh, look at that cutie, right? And I'm able to like smile and feel more engaged, and I present better when this slide image is up there. So it can be nerve-wracking to request feedback, let alone on something as personal and anxiety-inducing as public speaking. It's key to set expectations for your feedback givers and prepare them to absorb your notes. So do the same for your feedback crew, right? Give them details about the point that you want to make, who your audience will be, and what kind of feedback you're looking for. Here are just a few examples of the kinds of things you can ask your feedback crew to think about as they listen to you practice. So by priming their brains ahead of time and cluing them in to the kinds of feedback you're looking for, you'll both equip them well to help you and make sure you're ready for the kinds of things that they might say. This is because you need to prime your own brain to hear the feedback. So after the run through, thank your crew, and then take a moment to shift gears into feedback receiving mode. Let your crew know how you'd like to receive their thoughts and when. So maybe you're energized and you're ready to receive feedback in the moment. You just want to high five and dive right into the conversation. Or maybe you're a little drained and you don't want to receive feedback just yet. So I want to remind you, it's absolutely okay to request comments separately and in a different medium. Ask people to email you, ask people to talk it over coffee later, create an anonymous forum for them to submit feedback to. No matter what helps you feel better and more equipped to hear the feedback, tee that up for yourself. Remember, your feedback crew will want to help and support you. They want to do this in as easy a way for you as possible. So as an aside, while we're talking about prepping our brains, I want to call out one useful tip I've picked up along the way as I've given anybody feedback. It's called the micro yes. So if you want to give someone feedback, either in a prepared setting or just randomly, one way to make sure that their brain is open to hear it is to ask them, hey, is this a good time to give you some feedback? they'll probably say yes. 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. And that act of saying yes triggers an immediate physiological reaction that helps them brace themselves for what you're about to say. So getting that micro yes primes us in the most subtle way to absorb what we're about to hear. I promise, try it. It really works, especially if you're a manager, or worse, you have to give feedback to your manager. Just say, hey, I got some feedback. Is now an okay time to share it with you? It works wonders. So have you ever had someone tell you, you did a great job? It feels good for like 30 seconds. You're like, oh yeah, I think, yeah, thanks, that did feel pretty good. But then you might start to wonder, what about that was good? Or like, was there anything that wasn't good? Or like, what should I keep on doing or doing better in the future? What we crave is feedback that will actually help us grow, something to help our message land, or for us to have more of an impact, or to know specifically what it is that people value. So let's talk about getting that kind of feedback from folks. So a company called Life Labs developed a way for us to think about feedback that uses suits of cards. This is cheesy, but this really helps you direct your feedback crew to give you actionable and specific feedback later. So we're looking at general and then specific and actionable feedback, positive and also negative. So hearts is feedback that's positive but not specific. Something like, I really liked your talk, or you look great today. That's a heart. Diamonds is feedback that's positive, but also specific or actionable. So something like, I thought your talk was funny, especially this joke you made, or I really liked that example that you used to help me engage better. That's a diamond. Clubs is feedback that's negative, but not specific or constructive. Like, I thought your talk was boring. That's a club. I hope you all never hear that. Spades, though, is feedback that's negative, but also provides specific suggestions. So like, my mind started to wander when you were talking through the code. I wonder if you could shorten it or provide a better visual to help keep the audience more engaged. That's a fantastic spade, right? We want to move into the specific and actionable. I recommend using this for any and all feedback you ever need to receive or deliver. Focus to ask for the specific and actionable, the diamonds and the spades. Also, if you're practicing outside of the masterclass program, I would definitely recommend sharing this feedback with others. I've seen it used in many strange, not presentation formats that work beautifully. So part of what makes diamond and spades feedback so valuable is that focus on the actionable item. It gives you something specific to respond to. So if your feedback crew is sharing more hearts or clubs, you can use open questions, so that's questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no, to turn their feedback back towards the concrete. So, for example, can you help me understand why I should include a code example? Or what specifically about that felt boring? Or how can I make this more powerful? I also want to emphasize now that it's going to be strange to hear maybe at this part of the presentation, but not all feedback is valuable. You know probably your audience best. You know the message that you want to deliver. And you also should remember that not all feedback needs to be incorporated. Hopefully, you've cultivated a feedback crew that you can count on to provide thoughtful and honest critique, but responses are also subjective. I think that we all know that when we receive feedback, it's often more about the feedback giver than the feedback receiver. So remember, as you hear feedback, either use open questions to help them turn that feedback into more actionable, concrete, specific feedback, or just hold in your heart and hold in your brain like, all right, that was more about them than it was about me. I'll figure out how and if I should incorporate this later. All right, so let's do this. You figured out what it is that you want to say, and you've found your groove in saying it. Maybe you've practiced a bit, and hopefully you've gotten some feedback that will help you make your words and your speaking style way more impactful. So the last leg of our journey is to figure out which bits of our environment we can tweak to set ourselves up for success. So think about what clothing would get you in mind for your moment. What would make you feel like a superhero? What could you wear that will make you feel the strongest, most secure, and most grounded when you're in that spotlight? What I'm wearing right now makes me feel like myself, but like a slightly dressier version of myself. It holds up to any kind of stage lights, and if I had a battery pack clipped to me, it would still hold up to the weight of that. And it doesn't make too much sound when I move, and it also hides my hilarious flop sweat that's happening, and it looks like I'm taking this event seriously. And again, that most important fear that I have, which is about tripping and falling, I'm probably not going to fall in these shoes. So again, think about what's going to make you feel the most grounded when you're standing up here. So that trip and fall fear is why I also emphasize to everyone, get the lay of the land before you stand up and speak. So before every conference talk, I'll do a tech check where I plug my laptop in and test the slides and if possible, the remote control. You'll probably see other speakers doing this at conferences now. So this isn't just relevant to people giving big presentations though. Get the land before any big moment. If you're in an uncomfortable setting and you're not sure of what the tech setup is, go and check it out beforehand. And if this kind of prepared talk is way out of the norm for you, take some extra time to see what it feels like to be in that spotlight. This is probably the weirdest part about conference talks. There's no way to like slowly dip your toes in to knowing what it feels like to be blinded by spotlights. So if you can, if this is totally out of place for you, get up on stage somewhere before you have to give a talk, just like sneak up on stage, or ask the conference organizers probably, to sneak up on stage and see what it feels like. See if you can see the people in the audience. See what it feels like to be different distances from your laptop. See what it feels like to move around the stage, because this will help you feel more comfortable when the actual time comes. One time, the conference I was speaking at was completely unprepared to connect my Mac laptop to a projector. Thank goodness I had my slide deck and fonts saved to a thumb drive. I was able to load it up on someone else's machine. I can't tell you how much better I feel standing here, knowing that I have a backup plan ready to go, saved to Dropbox, if my laptop dies. I could just hand it to the excellent AV team here and it'd be totally fine. So if you're giving a demo of some work, also remember you may not have internet access or it may be spotty. So have a backup plan, record a screencast or something else to make sure you have a backup plan in case all of the tech situation fails for you. So you may have seen me standing off to the side before I got up here. I was doing a little Superman pose, which looks a little bit more subtle than maybe a starfish pose. So these body positions, these power poses are proven to be effective. There's a great Amy Cuddy talk on TED Talk about this. It will help change your body chemicals and get your whole body ready to get up on stage or have a job interview or whatever else that you need to do. So find a corner, find a bathroom stall, get a quiet place to ready yourself for that spotlight. Do whatever you need to get energized and to center yourself. Then get up there. So I'm up here, I'm doing it. I hope it's going well. I know which parts I've kind of stumbled on. I know which parts I would iterate on for future versions of this talk. I'm thinking about Q&A. I'm checking the time. Like there's a whole bunch of things that are happening up here that I'd be happy to also answer questions about after. So after we're done, though, I'm going to take a big sigh of relief, right? Like high-five myself, maybe eat a donut. So let out that breath, give a cheer. Make sure you're celebrating for yourself what the big important thing was that you just did. This is not a small feat. And remember this Raquel Velez quote. So this won't be the last time you said something prepared to someone. And she says, talks don't define you, you define you. Talks come and go, but every single one will make you a better you. Remember that trust your own gut, do your own audience, do your own read on how well it went, and take notes for yourself on what to improve for next time. Feedback from your audience can be exhilarating and daunting. So as you log people's reactions, try to focus on the constructive pieces, those diamonds and spades, the notes that'll make your speaking style and words even stronger in the future. Bask in all the praise, the head nods, the high fives. This was from a 6th grader when I spoke at a career day, and I would call this a heart rather than diamond. But I really do appreciate that the 6th grader thought it was really fun and cool. So I mentioned this a few moments ago, but like donuts, I think, are a crucial part of the speaking celebration process in any career achievement celebration. So years ago, I found that whenever something awesome happened in my career, maybe I got published or promoted or launched a project, I wouldn't take the time to celebrate the achievement. And I'm an achiever by nature. I have a feeling that probably most people in this room feel this way. Not deliberately marking these moments can often make us feel like we're not making any progress in our careers, especially with something as intangible as tech work or getting up and speaking on stage. So once I realized this was happening, I decided to be deliberate about marking achievements by eating one donut, or more than one donut if it was a really big achievement. So the act of donut eating has helped me feel like I'm accomplishing my career goals because it forces me to take a minute and focus on this thing and just sit with it, because donuts to me feel like celebration. I started to share this idea with more people, and I wrote a lot about in the book a bunch, because like I really want everybody else to feel like you're making progress and know that you're doing this for your own good, and knowing this you're actually making progress in your career. So whatever your version of a donut is, it's probably not a donut. I know folks that for whom a hot tub and a margarita is their donut. Like it could be anything. Make sure that you're doing this for yourself after you get up and speak. All right, so we're here now. So share your work and your knowledge, right? With your boss or other higher-ups, with your team, with your community. We do need your voice. We want to hear what you have to teach us, and we want to learn from your work and your insight. We need a broader spectrum of voices to help us move forward as an industry. So please use these tactics to find a spotlight. We are all here rooting for you. And that's it. Thank you. Questions?
Absolutely.
Got a question box?
We sure do. First of all, thank you, Laura, for coming in today. We've had a couple of questions come in, so I might be reading off a few for you, if that's all right. First question that we've had come in is, how do I, as a speaker, help to invoke feedback from my audience?
during, like, I'm going to guess that this is probably during an actual big audience thing. So there's a number of different ways that I've seen conferences collect feedback from their audience members. This is a great question. Sometimes you'll have like star ratings on like a conference website people can submit after the talk. If I know that that's happening at the conference I'm speaking at, I will make sure before I begin, I will say, hey, don't forget to leave a rating or leave me some feedback on the conference page, and I'll link to it. Usually I'll tweet about it or something. Definitely encourage it that way. Also, if you can, get to know the organizers well enough, you can actually ask them for feedback afterwards, because they know how it went, right? They have a good sense of like how much the Wi-Fi was being used, people were bored during your talk, or how much they saw engagement in other ways afterwards. So ask the organizers as well if you can.
Great. And we can certainly share the mic if we have some questions inside the room as well. Just feel free to raise your hand and we'll get the mic over. Yeah.
I was wondering if preparing for a talk like this where there's only a few of us in the room and you don't really know what your audience looks like is different in any ways from what you do an in-person conference talk where you know you're going to have a large crowd in front of you.
Totally. It feels super different. And it's funny, when I talk to folks about their fears, some folks prefer a more intimate setting. It feels lower stakes. Some folks, if they can see audience faces, though, it feels way higher stakes if it's a smaller crowd. So everybody's different this way. Because I've had the privilege of giving a lot of talks like over the air, like we do here, but mostly at work, it feels a lot less pressure because I know that there's probably some question mark number of people. The hardest part for me and for others, I think, ends up being eye contact. So if you've got a large group, you can look at different areas or pockets of people. Here, I am like literally looking at every single one of you and hoping that I'm making eye contact with somebody out there. And I think that for me is probably the most difficult. In terms of preparation, there's not a huge difference other than setting your own expectations and like not getting freaked out if you're actually making eye contact, or like people are looking like they're falling asleep. It's way, way different, yeah. Actually, when I was practicing this talk in a run through with my coworkers, one of my coworkers fell asleep with an early iteration of this talk, and I'm so thankful that happened because that gave me a lot of data and insight into the part that was boring that I was able to hopefully improve on.
That's great. I think a related question that ties in quite well is one that we had in the Etherpad. What strategies do you use for targeting your technical talks to the right skill level when you don't have a clear picture of what your audience will look like? How do you find the sweet spot?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Leah Veru did a bunch of writing on this that I learned a lot from. So what Leah wrote was try to aim a little bit higher than what you think your audience will already have experience in or an aptitude for. This is because if you, quote unquote, dumb it down, which is a harsh way of saying talk in more layman's terms or include more 101 level stuff, audiences are more likely to blame themselves if they don't understand what you're talking about, but they're more likely to blame you if it feels too 101 or interlevel. So definitely aim like a little bit higher than you think the audience will be able to adapt to in the moment. They'll also do plenty of research if they're confused about it, but inspired by it afterwards. So don't worry about covering all of the possible ground for your audience members.
Great, thank you. Any questions inside the room?
I love these boxes, really showcase hand-eye coordination. Yeah.
So I was wondering about the Etsy infinite scrolling thing you mentioned. Could you talk about that change a little more and what the problem was there?
Yeah, that's hilarious. I didn't mean to nerd snipe you with that. I'm so sorry.
What was broken?
So we still don't know actually what specifically it was. Like we have hypotheses as to like why our users may have had better interactions with the site when it wasn't infinite scrolling. We don't really know. Like you can always guess. You can do user testing. You can like interview some people with qualitative methods, but quantitatively, we have an in-house A/B testing framework that we use to find this out. There's actually a Code as Craft post about this whole experiment. What we found, you should definitely check it out.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. And Potch in Mountain View writes, during the day of, what tools do you use to help steady your pace and keep the right words per minute?
Totally. So for me, when I know I get too excited about something, I'm probably speaking too fast. So in my head, I have a constant like, how excited or happy are you right now? Take a deep breath thing happening. But also in my presenter notes, which you can't see, I have notes to breathe and to click. I also have notes to pause. So for me, I'm able to like have like little reminders in here that tell me what to do and remind me to chill out a little bit. I've also found that other presenters like to have a water bottle or something else they can use with their hands to take a deep breath, take a sip of water, to relax themselves that way. So having something handy like that is really great.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
So you've talked a lot about sort of like the ideal scenario where you have a lot of time to prepare for a talk, but let's say you're called into a meeting like last minute and you're asked to speak on a topic and you know the topic but you haven't fully prepared and you find yourself just like getting flustered or
Totally.
What are some tips for that?
Winging it, yeah. So this really depends on what will make you the most comfortable. I think you'll know yourself best. So for me, it helps me like decrease the stress level in the room if I acknowledge the situation. Like it can be really intimidating, especially if it's like very important people at your company that you're saying this in front of. Audiences actively root for us. Audiences don't want us to fail or to fumble, especially even your coworkers, I would hope, don't want you to fail or to fumble. So by acknowledging like, hey, this is last minute, I'm going to do my best right now. And if we have other follow-up questions afterwards, I'm happy to get to them. By acknowledging that in the room and like setting the stage that way, people will be a lot more empathetic to your situation. It also gives you permission to say, I don't know the answer to that question. I'll look it up after. Or like, I don't know the answer to that question. Does someone else in the room know the answer? Or literally just like help to redirect things back to what you know you wanted to cover and just say like, I'll get to that later. I'll respond later. You know what? You punt it as most you feel comfortable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Javi.
Okay, I've got 1+1 from
Great.
the Etherpad. So I wanted to know about giving specific and actionable feedback to someone like me, who finds themselves rocking back and forth or putting their hands in their pockets. I have trouble staying still when I'm presenting.
Totally.
And then there was a follow-on question from somebody else. What advice or what actionable feedback would you offer to someone who gestures too much as a crutch for managing nervousness?
Yeah, totally. I am super jazzed about all the questions in the Ethernet. This is like, if you don't know how many people are actually watching, like the amount of questions and interest is like a good, reassuring sign. So the cool thing about the hearts and stars, and I'll bring the hearts and diamonds rather, and clubs and spades. Oh, I love that picture of Beyonce. Here we go. So the cool thing about specific and actionable feedback is, there's a couple of things that happen. By asking your crew to be framing it in diamonds and spades, you're removing the judgment from them. They're going to be focusing all of their brain energy on, is this specific, is this actionable? And it becomes a lot easier for them to give harsher criticism because they'll be spending most of their mental energy trying not to soften it, but trying to make it helpful to the feedback receiver. So when something is as personal as gesturing too much or moving too much, I find that using the diamonds and the spades can be more of a reflection on what is this doing for the audience member. So here's an example. So one of the things I observed was you shifted your weight a lot between your 2 feet. I found that for me that was distracting as I was watching you. So that is, again, specific and it's actionable, meaning specific rather, it's like you're observing the thing, it can be recorded on camera. It's not just a judgment or a feeling about it. The distraction part helps the person understand why this is something that you're calling out. It's not just that because you didn't like it. It was literally because it was distracting to you as an audience member. So coming to your second question, what would you do about it? First of all, I'm sorry, practice is going to be really helpful. Second, watching yourself on camera. I know no one who is comfortable watching themselves on camera. I cannot tell you another speaker who's like, I love listening to the sound of my own voice. But definitely I would recommend as much as humanly possible, do a talk the whole way through, record it, even if it's just by yourself, and then watch it afterwards. Start to pick up on what you are doing that's having this effect, and see if there's like ways that you can be observant of this in yourself. For me, like the speaking, the breathing fast thing, because I knew that I was doing this when I got excited, I was able to start to observe that in my own body and my own brain, and that helped me start to improve it in the future. I would definitely recommend, if you're a feedback giver who's giving this kind of feedback, don't interrupt the person or don't stop them while it's our instinct to be like, you're shifting your weight again or you're moving your hands weird again. Don't do that. Let them get to the end, give them this feedback, and then help them do a run through again. Yeah.
So you mentioned prepping your audience during your slide deck. Make sure I get this question correct. Do you literally show the outline for your talk on a slide as a way of kind of saying, here's the structure for our talk and here's what we'll be touching on?
Yeah, I totally do. In fact, I did that here. I can show you an example, which is sneaky because it came when I built it in here, it came later than it normally does. Look at that. So I did a whole bunch of landscape and analysis before I got to the agenda slide, which is typical for me. I don't want to just start with a really dry agenda. Like, although the eating your donut usually gets enough of a good laugh, it feels a little bit of an engagement. But I usually like to build in something like this, even if it's not numbered. I think there's another example of an image I have in here. There it is. Here's another example for my web performance talk. So I kept it high level enough people didn't have to read too much, so people could scan it, but still be listening to the words that I was saying while I was talking over this slide. But yeah, I definitely like to include literally like almost like an agenda of what I'm going to cover, because also people are tracking in their brain how far along you are in the talk, and that's actually is often a stress reliever for the audience.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any questions inside the room? Okay, we do have one more online.
Great.
So you mentioned sometimes adding options to your deck. Do you ever put silly or intentionally bad options into your presentation as a way of steering people towards one answer?
Absolutely, I do. I do it usually in like really overt ways. I try not to be too sneaky about it. I'm like, look at this terrible option. Like, for instance, when we were talking back in the days before responsive web design was really a thing, people were including it as an option, or an MDOT site, or just do nothing to optimize your site for mobile users. And like providing those other sillier or like less obvious options can be really helpful to make your point that responsive web design is like a really smart thing. So yeah, totally. Provide terrible options. It'll really help your point land.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one more sort of coming in off the Etherpad. It has to do with techniques for staying true to your time frame and your content.
Yeah. What's the question?
What are the sorry, I paraphrased, my bad. What are the techniques that can be used to stay true to your time frame and content?
What do you think
comes
stay
from
true?
Tunisia,
Yeah.
this
okay,
question.
Great. Yeah. What do you think stay true to means in this context? In other words, like stay on topic?
I'm gonna do a little bit of guessing.
We can guess,
yeah. I think being aware of the time you have and filling it. I've seen that as a question that repeats often.
Ooh, yeah.
So that part, but then also not going off on tangents.
Totally. Practice is really helpful. But also, I will say, I get to a point in practice where I know how much time my talk is going to take. So I'm able to either pad it with extra things if I find that I'm speaking too fast and going under time, or I'm able to shorten it up if say I have like a different, the speaker before me runs over time, I need to shorten mine up anyway. So by practicing and having a good estimation of like how much time you typically take on average to cover this topic, that's really helpful, and have like a little internal clock. When it comes to staying on topic, the best thing you can do is know in your head when you are most likely to get off tangent. So for me, if I'm getting too excited about, again, a thing, I will often go off tangent. The first time I told the mobile icon font story, it was not planned. I just got really excited about it. I thought it might be relevant and get a good laugh, so I used that joke. It can go really well, it can go really poorly. I think what you have to do is know your content well enough to recognize in yourself, I'm going off topic, or I might be going over or under time.
Last call for questions. If there's no more questions, we're going to shift into donuts, everybody.
Donuts. Yay. Thanks, everybody. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really do have donuts in room. I know that's really cruel to the 60-some live stream.
I'm so sorry about live streamers, yeah. Have your own donut on my behalf after this.